For over 250 years, the practice of Obeah was criminalized in Jamaica with laws so severe that practitioners could face death, flogging, or imprisonment. While colonial authorities justified this ban by claiming to protect public safety and promote Christian morality, the real reason was far more revealing. Obeah was a potent weapon of resistance that fueled some of the most significant slave rebellions in Caribbean history. Obeah is a complex system of African-derived spiritual practices involving healing, protection, divination, and the manipulation of supernatural forces. Brought to Jamaica by enslaved West Africans, particularly from the Akan Igbo and other ethnic groups, Obeah became more than just a religious practice. It became a cornerstone of psychological and spiritual resistance against the brutality of slavery. In a system designed to strip enslaved people of their humanity, culture, and hope, Obeah offered something the plantation system could never provide: a sense of agency, power, and connection to their ancestral roots. Obeah practitioners, often called Obeah men or women, held positions of enormous influence within enslaved communities. They were healers, counselors, and spiritual leaders who maintained African traditions and provided alternatives to the imposed Christian worldview of their enslavers. The pivotal moment that led to Obeah's criminalization was Tacky's rebellion in 1760. One of the largest and most sophisticated slave uprisings in Jamaican history. Led by Tacky, a Coromantee Akan war chief who had been enslaved, the rebellion revealed the central role Obeah played in organized resistance. Before the uprising, an Obeah man performed elaborate ceremonies, administering oaths of loyalty and secrecy to the rebels. He distributed protective amulets and charms, assuring fighters that these would make them invulnerable to British bullets and ensure victory. He sprinkled participants with a powder that he claimed would make them invisible to their enemies and give them supernatural strength. The rebellion began on Easter Monday, when Tacky and his followers seized guns and ammunition from a fort and moved through plantations, killing enslavers and recruiting others to join them. At its height, the revolt involved over 1,000 fighters and spread across multiple parishes. The British required months, hundreds of soldiers, and the assistance of Maroon fighters to finally suppress it. Tacky himself was killed, but not before inflicting significant casualties and striking terror into the hearts of the colonial establishment. The British were stunned, not just by the scale of the rebellion, but by the fearlessness of the fighters. Many rebels fought with extraordinary courage, seemingly undeterred by overwhelming military force. Colonial authorities attributed this boldness to the supernatural delusions created by Obeah, recognizing that spiritual belief had transformed ordinary people into formidable warriors willing to die for freedom. Within months of crushing Tacky's rebellion, the Jamaican Assembly passed severe anti-Obeah laws. The legislation made it a capital offence to practice Obeah or even possess Obeah materials. The penalty was death or transportation off the island. The law specifically targeted those who pretend to have communication with the devil and other evil spirits, and used blood, feathers, parrots' beaks, dogs' teeth, alligators' teeth, broken bottles, grave dirt, rum, eggshells, and other materials in their practices. This wasn't about superstition or protecting people from fraud. The British understood perfectly well that Obeah was a revolutionary force. By banning it, they aimed to sever the spiritual and psychological lifeline that sustained resistance. Tacky's rebellion wasn't the only uprising where Obeah played a crucial role. The spiritual practice remained central to resistance throughout the slavery period and beyond. During the Second Maroon War, which lasted from 1795 to 1796, Maroon fighters utilized Obeah practices for protection and to maintain morale. Though the Maroons had previously allied with the British against slave rebellions, their own war for autonomy drew upon spiritual traditions similar to Obeah. The Baptist War, also known as the Christmas Rebellion of 1831, led by national hero Sam Sharpe, was the largest slave uprising in Jamaican history, involving over 60,000 enslaved people. While Sharpe himself was a Baptist deacon who used Christian rhetoric, many participants still relied on Obeah practitioners for spiritual protection and guidance. The rebellion combined Christian millennial expectations with African spiritual practices, creating a powerful syncretic force for liberation. Throughout these uprisings, Obeah practitioners served multiple critical functions. They administered oaths that bound conspirators to secrecy, making it harder for enslavers to discover plots through informants. They provided protective charms that gave fighters psychological confidence to face armed troops. They offered prophecies and divinations about the best timing for revolts. Perhaps most importantly, they maintained a spiritual worldview in which enslaved people were not powerless victims, but agents capable of wielding supernatural forces against their oppressors. Colonial authorities feared Obeah for good reason. It represented everything the plantation system tried to destroy. Obeah practitioners held power and influence completely outside colonial control. Enslaved people sought their counsel for disputes, healing, and major decisions, rather than turning to plantation authorities or Christian ministers. Belief in Obeah's power gave enslaved people a sense of agency in a system designed to render them powerless. If an Obeah man could curse an overseer or protect someone from punishment, it meant the enslaver's power wasn't absolute. Obeah also maintained African identities, languages and worldviews that slavery attempted to erase. It kept alive the memory that enslaved people came from societies with their own systems of knowledge, authority and spirituality. Moreover, Obeah networks created communication channels across plantations and parishes. Practitioners travelled between estates to see clients, inadvertently creating intelligence networks that could coordinate large-scale rebellions. Perhaps most dangerously, Obeah could make people unafraid. Enslaved individuals who believed they possessed supernatural protection were willing to risk everything for freedom. This fearlessness was contagious and terrifying to those who depended on fear to maintain control. Another dimension of colonial fear involved Obeah practitioners' extensive botanical knowledge. Many were skilled herbalists who understood which plants could heal and which could kill. While this knowledge was primarily used for medicine, it also meant that Obeah practitioners potentially possessed the means to poison food, water, or even individual enslavers. Cases of suspected poisoning, whether real or imagined, created paranoia among the planter class. They lived in constant fear that their food, drink, or even their trusted domestic servants might be instruments of revenge. Obeah practitioners, with their knowledge of plants and reputation for supernatural power, became the focus of these anxieties. The British saw banning Obeah as essential to preventing both armed rebellion and covert resistance through poisoning. When slavery was abolished in the British Empire in 1834, many expected Obeah laws to be repealed. Instead, they were strengthened. The Obeah Act of 1898 imposed even harsher penalties, including imprisonment with hard labour. Why maintain these laws after slavery ended? The answer reveals that Obeah's threat went beyond preventing slave revolts.